Kevin O'Leary once said, "You can live on $500,000 in the bank and do nothing else to make money." Sounds crazy, right? But the numbers might actually surprise you. It's a bold statement, one that sounds both inspiring and a little unbelievable. $500,000? It's a lot of money, but in today's world, it doesn't exactly scream financial freedom. Most people hear that number and think, that's not enough to retire. But that's exactly where the misunderstanding begins. Kevin's not one to make offhanded claims about money. He's a successful investor many times over, and his advice usually comes from experience. So let's break this down. What does he actually mean when he says that? Can someone really live off $500,000 without working another day in their life? The first thing to understand is that when Kevin says in the bank, he's not talking about letting all the money sit in a checking or savings account earning 0.5% interest. He's talking about that money being invested in a diversified portfolio of stocks and bonds or something like the S&P 500 that can generate consistent returns over time. He's describing money that's actively working for you, earning income and compounding. That distinction is crucial because the difference between literal cash and invested capital is the difference between seeing your wealth decline to eventually be worthless or snowballing into a huge amount. Hitting this amount is about the time your relationship with money takes a drastically positive shift. Kevin calls this the baseline, the point where money works for you in a noticeable way. But he's quick to clarify that this depends heavily on lifestyle. If your dream retirement is flying first class around the world, dining at the finest restaurants every night, and living in a large city, $500,000 won't even scratch the surface. The reality is, living on $500,000 isn't luxurious, it's modest. So what kind of lifestyle does it really buy? Let's take a look at the numbers, and then a little later, we'll take a look at how it could actually be a pretty comfortable retirement income. Kevin's strategy is built around generating income from investments. He says you could earn roughly 5% annually through low-risk, fixed-income investments, or potentially up to 8.5% to 9% if you include equities in your portfolio. Historically, the S&P 500 has returned about 10% per year before inflation, so these numbers are realistic, not pie-in-the-sky fantasies. And when he says you can live off $500,000, he's referring to the amount you could safely withdraw each year, which Kevin says is about 5%, or $25,000 per year. You might be thinking, $25,000 a year? That barely covers rent. And you're right, for most people, it wouldn't. But wait until you see how it really breaks down. Think about this. A single person with no mortgage, minimal debt, and a modest lifestyle in a mid-cost city could live on $25,000 a year without starving, but would really need to prioritize necessities over luxury. It can be done, but it's a little tough. You'd really need to be careful to keep your lifestyle simple, minimizing housing costs with a paid-off home or a roommate, keeping transportation expenses low, and watching your budget closely when it comes to dining out and things like that. To some, this kind of lifestyle feels refreshing. It's about simplicity, purpose, embracing minimalism, and escaping consumerism. They find meaning in needing less. But for others, it feels restrictive, like constantly saying no to the things that make life enjoyable, defeating the purpose of retiring in the first place. Most people's jaws hit the floor when they see how it plays out in real life when someone is intentional on living with less. Start by picturing yourself with this amount of money in your 30s. To make it work, you'd probably either need a low mortgage, live with a roommate, or use some form of house hacking, such as renting out rooms, a basement, or half of a duplex. For example, if you're renting a $1,500 apartment with a roommate, your share would be $750 per month. That leaves roughly $16,000 a year pre-tax for everything else. And you might even fall into the 0% tax bracket. Keep your transportation costs low by avoiding an $800 car payment, and suddenly it becomes manageable. This approach works if you're single, but it can be pretty challenging if you have a family. And just to be clear, Kevin isn't saying this is a life of luxury. It's simply about making it work at this level. Now, is 5% a realistic withdrawal rate? Financial planners often reference the 4% guideline, suggesting that you can safely withdraw 4% of your portfolio annually, adjusting for inflation each year without running out of money. The creator of the rule, William Bengen, recently updated his recommendation, saying that 4 to 5% can be reasonable depending on your flexibility, your time horizon, and market conditions. Applied to a $500,000 portfolio, 4% gives you $20,000 per year, while 5% gives you $25,000. These figures line up closely with Kevin's baseline estimates, showing that his example is grounded in practical, historically tested financial principles. If this all feels out of reach so far, don't write an angry comment, dislike, or unsubscribe just yet, because this next part might be the most surprising thing of all. Kevin stresses that it's very doable for even someone with an average salary to get there. Sure, it takes time for compounding to work, but even if you're only contributing a relatively small amount each month, you'll get there. For example, someone starting with nothing who contributes $7,000 per year to a Roth IRA could end up with about $660,000 after 30 years and roughly $1.4 million after 40 years, assuming an inflation-adjusted market average return. It's a long haul, no question about it, but that's essentially the result if you do just the minimum. For context, that's like investing less than 10% of the median household income. An investor who takes a more aggressive approach would see a drastically different outcome. But let's not sugarcoat it. Living on $500,000 is a bit tight. It requires planning, self-discipline, sacrifice, and most importantly, the willingness to live on less. Your housing costs need to be low, your spending controlled, and your investments positioned to generate steady growth without exposing you to excessive risk. Yet for someone willing to make those choices, it's achievable, and it sets the foundation for a more comfortable lifestyle later. Because the less you spend, the less you actually need to invest to reach financial freedom. So if your lifestyle includes regularly dropping $350 on fancy dinners, driving high-end cars, or living in an expensive home with big tax and maintenance bills, you're quietly pushing your retirement further and further away. Every lifestyle upgrade raises the bar you have to clear before you can stop working. The key here is really understanding what type of lifestyle you want. Do you want the luxury lifestyle, or do you want the freedom to retire early and live simply? Because that's the trade-off. Others want luxury cars, the big house, and the dream vacations. While $500,000 can technically support someone, the margin for error is small. Even a small rise in living expenses could turn a manageable budget into a tight squeeze. That's why Kevin admits a more comfortable target, $1.5 million. At that level, withdrawals of just 5% provide $75,000 per year, before factoring in any other income. Think about this in practical terms. A couple retiring with $1.5 million invested could comfortably cover housing, food, utilities, healthcare, and travel. They could afford occasional dining out, hobbies, and small luxuries without constantly scrutinizing every dollar. It's enough to feel secure, flexible, and comfortable. Not extravagant, but genuinely enjoyable. And here's where things really shift. In Kevin's words, you begin to glide at $1.5 million. You're no longer just covering the basics, you're living well. Your portfolio's growth comfortably supports your lifestyle, and you can enjoy some of life's finer luxuries, nicer vacations, spontaneous weekends away, or upgrading your car or home without really stressing about it. But here's the pleasantly surprising part. Retirees who are old enough to collect Social Security could be living very comfortably without millions in the bank. With $500,000 invested at a 5% withdrawal rate, you'd have $25,000 per year. Add in average Social Security benefits for a couple, and that total jumps to about $73,000 annually. Now, if you scale that up to $1.5 million, that same withdrawal brings you roughly $123,000 per year, a significant boost in lifestyle and flexibility. Living on a low amount is best suited for those who want to retire early and then explore other options. It's not necessarily about never working again, it's about leaving the grind behind. Think of someone who spent years in a corporate cubicle, finally hitting a point where they can cover the basics passively. They step away from their 9-to-5 job and buy themselves time. Time to build a small business, start freelancing, start a podcast, open a food truck, or pursue a passion project that might not pay as much at first, but feels far more fulfilling. They're not permanently retired in the traditional sense, they're financially flexible enough to work on what they actually want to do, not what they have to do. So in theory, you can live on $500,000 and do nothing else. It's possible, it's achievable, and even someone with an average income can reach it. But it's a minimalist, cautious lifestyle, and that's what makes this conversation so powerful. It's not really about $500,000 or $1.5 million. It's about what kind of life you're looking for. If you want comfort, flexibility, and ultimate peace of mind, a more realistic target is higher. Then you're not just getting by, you're living comfortably, with the confidence and security that comes from having a robust portfolio.